When most people think of stencils, the first thing that comes to mind is paint, because that's what we use with stencils so frequently. I have a couple different kinds of paint here, and I'm going to show you how stencils can be used, with each thickness of paint, because it's a little bit different depending on the type of paint you have. I will say one thing: keep it dry, and you need less paint than you think. So this is a heavy body paint, and this would be the easiest paint to stencil with, because look how thick it is. So to keep it dry is going to be pretty easy right from the start. The best way to stencil with paint, I think, is to use a sponge. Some people like brushes, but not me. I like the sponge, and I put some paint on and then I pounce it off like I'm doing right here. So with that approach, I can get a lot of detail. Pounce up and down. Going like this is only going to tend to make the paint go underneath the stencil. So if you stay up and down, you can't get into too much trouble, and you'll get a nice crisp result. Let's say you want to do some words, because there's a lot of great word stencils out there. Same deal. Get it on your sponge, up and down, up and down. If you are a little hesitant, you can always use some tape to tape your stencil down, and there are also spray adhesives that work for keeping the stencil in place. I tend to just wing it, but it's all a matter of personal preference. So that was a heavy body paint. Now let's take a look at what is called a fluid acrylic. You can hear when you shake it that it's much more liquid, and it looks more liquid when it comes out of the container. Fluid acrylics might seem tricky, not so much. Same thing, pounce up and down. And there you go. Here's another paint that is a chalk finish acrylic. It's kind of maybe not as thick as the heavy body and not as thin as the fluid, kind of in between. Once again, I do exactly the same technique. I pounce up and down. And that is the key. It's just as easy as that. I bet you never thought of stenciling with watercolor, did you? Well, I am going to show you how that might work. I have previously wet down these watercolor paints, and I'm going to use this stencil for the demo. I'm going to grab a little bit of the watercolor. It's pretty wet on there. I'm going to just pounce to make sure it's distributed over that sponge well. Okay? And again, up and down, up and down. Look how fluid it is and how wet it is. But you can get a pretty decent result with watercolor. It might be surprising. Let's see it with a more detailed stencil. Little less paint this time, and a better result. So that is the key. Use a sponge, the densest sponge you can find. These are craft sponges available in most of the big box stores, and this is a sponge that is actually, I believe, made to use with fabric, but I like it rather a lot. I think a dense sponge works the best. And keep your paint as dry as you can, and you will achieve success with paints and stencils.